Welcome to Wildcat Science with Mrs. Haugo. This is Human Biology, Chapter 8, Part 3. And today we're going to start out talking about exercise and the different types of exercise. So, the effects of exercise are grouped into two different categories. So resistance training exercise has different effects than endurance or aerobic exercise. And resistance training is like lifting weights. So this causes hypertrophy, and we know hyper means above or bigger, so you're going to get bigger muscle cells. So larger muscle cells would have more actin and myosin filaments, so you actually have more protein fibers in your muscle. And if each little actin and myosin creates a little force, if you have more of them, you have more force, and so you can lift heavier weights. So also, besides just having bigger muscles that can lift heavier weights, you also increase your muscle cell storage of creatine phosphate and glycogen, which are both energy storage molecules. So glycogen is a polymer. It's a bunch of little glucose molecules linked together. And we know that glucose is needed for cellular respiration, which makes ATP. And we know we need ATP to contract our muscles. And then creatine phosphate is a different molecule that can be used when you run out of ATP because it has one of those high energy bonds. When you break it, it gives off energy. So let's look at aerobic exercise. So this is going to increase your muscular endurance, which means your muscles can contract more frequently and they can continue doing so for a longer period of time. So let's say you're running, your quad muscles or your glute muscles can keep doing that faster and for longer distances or longer periods of time. Also, it increases the blood supply. So you get more blood vessels, you get more efficient delivery of blood, and it also increases the number of mitochondria in the muscle cells. So why do we want more mitochondria? Well, we know mitochondria creates ATP. So if you have more ATP, you have more energy to contract your muscles. But about the blood supply, if you have more blood, blood is carrying oxygen. You have more oxygen that gets to your muscles so you can do that cellular respiration. But it also carries away waste. So you can get rid of that waste and the cells can keep performing their contractions. Interestingly, one of the best benefits of aerobic exercise is what it does for your heart. So it is like weightlifting for your heart. So it strengthens that cardiac muscle so the heart can pump blood more efficiently. When you exercise, you're going to get tired. So muscle fatigue is due to the depletion of something it needs, glycogen, which it's used to make glucose for cellular respiration, oxygen, which we know is used for cellular respiration, ATP if you're not doing cellular respiration fast enough and creating that ATP, and then also creatine phosphate, which can be used when you run out of ATP. It's still one of those high energy molecules. Or it's due to the buildup of bad stuff. So due to the buildup of lactic acid or phosphates. And lactic acid happens when you don't have enough oxygen to do aerobic cellular respiration, and you end up doing anaerobic cellular respiration, and you get that buildup of lactic acid, which really makes your muscles sore. Or if you have those phosphates, because when you cut down your ATP, which is adenosine triphosphate, and it gets used up, it's like the energy currency of the cell, and you cash it in, and it cuts that last phosphate off and gives off a lot of energy, and you have ADP, adenosine diphosphate, and so you just get a buildup of lots of those little phosphates, and they need to get gotten rid of, and if they don't get rid of fast enough, then you can get muscle fatigue. However, that is technically when your muscles are fatigued, but you feel fatigued way earlier than that. So basically, you get muscle fatigue because your brain says, this feels unpleasant, so let's just not work so hard. It reduces usually muscle fatigue is because brain reduces nerve impulses to muscles because the sensation of fatigue is unpleasant. So it says, we're just going to take it down a notch here. And basically when you exercise, the main thing you're doing is you're conditions the brain to be okay feeling fatigued. You say, yep, we've done this before, we're not dying, we're okay. We can go back to a 10, we can handle that. And that's why you can, a lot of why you can exercise more after you have been doing it. So let's look at the mechanics of muscle movement. Physically, what is happening when you contract that muscle? So muscles are attached to bones at least 2 points. And how are they attached? They are attached by tendons. And we call the attachment to the not movable bone the origin, and the attachment to the bone that moves the insertion. So origin, attachment to the immovable bone, and insertion, attachment to the movable bone. So the contraction brings the insertion, the movable bone, closer to the origin, the not movable bone, and so let's say, kind of hard to see the whole thing. There we go. Okay, so on page 170 it shows your biceps brachii, where you have the origin on your shoulder, which isn't moving, and the insertion is on the radius, which does move. And when I contract that biceps brachii and make those muscles fibers shorter, it brings the radius closer to my shoulder. You can see I can't even really fit it in the frame when I extend it. So your musculoskeletal system, your muscles and your bones, are a system of levers. Question for you is, did you study levers in middle school science? So a lever is a simple machine, and it has 3 parts, a fulcrum, an effort or a force, and then like a weight or resistance. And it's a simple machine that makes moving heavy things easier. And there's a picture on page 171 that looks a lot like, not this picture, but the next one. All right, let's look at some origins and insertions. As we talked about the biceps brachii, its origin is on the shoulder, on the scapula, and then its insertion is on the radius, and when this muscle contracts, it brings your muscle up, your bone up, excuse me, your forearm. And then over here on your gastrocnemius, your calf muscle, the origin is on the femur, and then the insertion is on the calcaneus bone. And so when it contracts, you're going to bring your foot up closer to the femur bone. Okay, looking at levers. So your book goes into first, second, and third class levers, where a first class lever looks a lot like a seesaw, where you have the fulcrum in the middle, and then you have the weight or the resistance, and then the effort on the other side. So some muscles are first class levers, where you have your joint is the fulcrum, and then the weight or the resistance is the weight of your head, and then the effort is supplied by the contracting muscle. So if you contract your back of your neck muscles, and we'll get into those in a minute, then your neck, your vertebrae, and your skull joint are the fulcrum, and then your head goes back. Looking at a second class lever, the fulcrum is actually on one side and the weight is in the middle. So your calf muscle, your gastrocnemius is an example. The fulcrum is your foot, and then the weight of the leg or the bone is in the middle, and then the effort is supplied on the outside. So when you contract your muscle up, your leg goes up. And I think you should just do that right now at your seat so that it's way easier than me showing you. All right, then a third class lever where the effort is in the middle. So the fulcrum, the joint, is on one end like it was here, but the weight of the bone is at the end, and then the muscle, the effort, is in the middle. So when you lift your arm up, so it's hard for you to see that, I'll just extend it even though they are starting from not straight out. When you lift your hand up, the weight is on the outside, my elbow joint is there, and then it is this muscle on the other side that is creating the effort. So that is how muscles, the musculoskeletal system functions. Okay, what kind of movements do we use those levers, those musculoskeletal levers, to make? Well, we're going to review some from the skeletal system, and then we're going to learn some new ones. You have flexion, extension, hyperextension. You have abduction and adduction. You have flexion and extension, and you could do that with your leg as well. And then pretend this is my foot. You have plantar flexion and dorsiflexion. Reviewing from the skeletal system, we have flexion, and if you remember, flexion is when you decrease the angle of the bones. So right here, we started out with 180 degrees, and we're bringing it up to 90. That's flexion. And then flexion is actually bringing it up. So from 180 degrees up to 90. So flexion goes this way with your arms and this way with your legs. Sometimes that's confusing, but if you think about decreasing the angle from 180 to 90, 180 to 90, that may help. Extension then is increasing the angle. So if it was up here at 90, bringing it to 180, and then if it was up here at 90, bringing it to 180, and then even bringing it back. And then hyperextension is bringing it past anatomical position. So we have flexion, extension, and then hyperextension. And we went over those in the skeletal system. We also did abduction, adduction, and circumduction. So abduction is away, adduction is towards the middle, circumduction is where you're combining several movements and going in a circle in that joint. So really only the hips and shoulder, and then that thumb joint can do circumduction that I know of. Rotation is kind of spinning on its axis. So you can rotate your neck because of that C1 and C2, the atlas and axis bones. And then you can rotate your hip. So you have like the lateral to the outside and medial to the inside. And then you can also rotate at the elbow joint too. That we actually call different things, pronation and supination, which we're going to get into. And I'll give you a little sneak peek at our next video. We're going to go over the new musculoskeletal movements: inversion, eversion, pronation, supination, and opposition. I will see you then. Bye.